Okay, how to find yourself a great coach. Now, a lot of people ask me about coaching. My background has been sort of 13 years running, and then I ran from being sort of 7, 8 years old up until 16, 17 years old. So I understand what it takes in order for me to get myself into peak performance, to get myself into peak shape in order to perform as best as I possibly can. But that doesn't make me a coach. What it means to be a coach is somebody that understands the art of coaching and understands that, yes, you can kind of write a schedule, but it's about knowing deeply, getting to know your athlete, getting to know, working on that relationship and understanding what a hard session means, what beat up means for them, what a really tough session means, and equally what too easy means. And when they're starting to break down and how that looks like. If you train 100 athletes and you ask 100 athletes, how hard was exactly the same session that they've done? How hard was it out of 100? You're gonna get a lot of different answers. And the point of that is that everybody has a different perception of how hard something is, how difficult it is, how much they can endure, how much they can kind of push through suffering and push through that level of discomfort that it takes in order to stress the body so that it can receive that super compensation and improve. So you need to get to know the athlete. And obviously in recent years, it's become more and more kind of accessible to coach people online and video calls and calls and WhatsApps and, regular contact. It still doesn't replace somebody actually being there for you. So I'd always say the first point of contact if you're looking for a coach is get to your local running club and get familiar. There's probably 2, 3, 4 different groups, and some of those will be focused on shorter distances, some of them will be focused on longer distances, and perhaps you're going to meet people that have similar types of goals as you, so that you can travel to the London Marathon together. You might be kind of traveling to Bristol Half or whatever that might be, but you've got a common goal, and you may find, if you're really lucky, you may find suitable people that are very similar to you in terms of what they're trying to achieve time-wise. So that can really help and push you along, and hopefully with that comes some kind of a coach. For me, when I was growing up, I had a brilliant coach, a guy called John Davies, who coached me from being sort of 8, 9 years old all the way up to 16, 17 years old. And I mean, this is the volunteer system within the amateur club system in the UK. So he would be there on a Tuesday night, on a Thursday night, and on Saturday and Sunday morning. Freezing cold in the winter to do cross country, and there on the track and field when in the summer when he could be doing anything better. And at the time, as a kid, you kind of think, oh well, that's an adult, and that's what adults do. They take care of younger people, and they're there. You kind of take it for granted. Looking back, it was such a positive role model for me. Somebody who was able to guide me, was able to coach me, was able to hold me back when I wanted to do too much, and was able to push me when I wasn't really feeling it. And you take that for granted because you just think that, oh, that's an adult. And you kind of think, we're children and that's an adult. But this was a guy who was only 28 years old, who didn't drive a car, so was having to get to training on a Tuesday and Thursday night on the bus and get to races by public transport or getting a lift off somebody at the weekend. And you cannot be more grateful for that. So if you get to your local club, you're going to find superheroes like that who are there for you and are volunteering their time and are really passionate about what they do. They do it for the love of it. They're not doing it for the money. They do it for the love of it. And that can be really, really powerful. Equally, my school teacher, my sports teacher at school, from being 11 to 16 and then college from 16 to 18, a guy called Andy Trigg, was a phenomenal endurance athlete, running course records all over the fells, all over England, Wales and Scotland, and was one of the best ultra runners of his time before ultra running was actually kind of a phrase. So he was just a 40-mile, 50-mile fell runner over the mountains in England and running course records, some of them which still stand today. And he helped guide me, and he had this, again, a type of personality that got to understand me as a kid and got to understand what made me tick and how to get the best out of me. And exactly the same with my dad. It wasn't a case of that I needed patting on the back. Still to this day, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Sort of like praise makes me feel uncomfortable. So for him, it was just, a sort of look or a question. Do you think you could have given more today? That kind of question that makes you kind of reflect and kind of ask yourself deep down, did I actually give my best today, or was I coasting, or could I have gone faster? Even if you won the race, could I have gone faster? Could I have got more out of myself? And that was often the question with my dad as well. And with my dad, it was only kind of a certain look that he needed to give me, or silence, and I know exactly what he was thinking, because you kind of have that with your parents. When I started to coach here in Chiang Mai, I was trying to work with an orphanage and trying to kind of get kids. For me, like growing up in Manchester, it was kind of black and white. It was like, if you put in the work, if you do the hard work, you're probably going to be okay. If you don't do the hard work, if you don't study at school, if you don't get involved in sports, you're probably going to find yourself drinking on street corners, and you're probably going to fall in with the wrong groups. Sport was a brilliant anchor for me as a kid, so I was very grateful for it. So I wanted to get involved in something here that would help kids at an orphanage who didn't have parents like I had, who would be able to guide them in the right direction. I wanted to be a positive influence on them. So I found a local orphanage, and I found them by becoming athletics coach at a school here in Chiang Mai. And I started to coach their track and field team, and they were running towards cross country and track and field, and it was a mix of personalities. So I remember thinking, just before I got there, it's 25, 30 kids. Their ages, they follow the American curriculum, so it's ages 11 to 19, which, in itself is very, very difficult to coach or even teach a lesson when you've got 11 to 19-year-olds. You're talking differently to each one of those individuals, but you kind of need to put a blanket sort of tone across. There's that difficulty to begin with, but I just thought, I'm going to be Andy Trigg. I'm going to be my sports teacher and walk into that and be the guy who's like, if you don't hit your times, you're doing another 2 laps. If you don't hit this, you're going to do another 3 laps. And it's kind of like, you really want to hit the target because you want to impress him. You want him to be proud of you. You want to get the best out of yourself, and you know that he's doing the absolute best for you. And he would talk to you in quite harsh language. And so that was what I felt I was going to be for these kids at Chiang Mai International School. It was completely different. It couldn't have been any more different, because I'd spoken to my friend who worked at the school before, and it was like, you just cannot speak to kids the way that you could speak to kids 5 years ago, speak to kids 10 years ago. And what I learned from that is it was a very softly approach. So some kids would say, obviously it's Chiang Mai, it's 40 degrees, 45 degrees sometimes, and it's like some kids would just be like, oh, it's too hot today. And my reaction to that would be like, well, if it's too hot, forget it, But you kind of had to go, well, is it really too hot, or can you do a little bit? Can you do 20 minutes instead of the hour of the session? So it was a more softly approach than I would usually give. It was more, I couldn't be as direct as I really wanted to. The kids would turn up, oh, my knee's hurting today, or I haven't brought my right shoes, or I haven't brought my right kit. When I was at school, and I risk sounding like an old man here, but when I was at school, if a kid didn't bring their kit for rugby or for football or for cross country, they were doing it in their boxer shorts. And it was that kind of like, well, we don't care if you forgot your kit. You're going to do it in the clothes that you're wearing, even if that means going back into the class with a dirty uniform. That's what you're doing, because it's your fault you forgot your kit. So there's that accountability, there's that level of responsibility. And so you didn't forget your kit again because you didn't want to do cross country in your boxer shorts. That couldn't happen with the school. It was a much more softly approach, and there was different personalities. I could see in a couple of the kids, they were very kind of like very, very driven, wanted to win, very, very ultra competitive, and really, really disappointed when they come, for instance, second, or they didn't get themselves and they beat themselves up. And then I could see the sort of dynamic and the chemistry they had with their parents afterwards, and their parents were, oh, it's okay, you didn't win, but you did your best, and that wasn't good enough for them. My dad wouldn't have been like that. It would have been more like, well, what could you have done to do better? Or why did you let him take that lead in that third lap when that that's the important lap in a 1500 meter race? So it was a very different dynamic, and then you try to kind of coach each individual as best as you possibly can. And try to get the best of the group collectively, but on an individual basis. So it's very, very different. And then when I've had people contact me over the years, and you kind of, as an athlete, you try to kind of like start a coaching business, and you coach people because you have something to offer. But you want the personality to match. So I'll often sort of have a setup call where it will be, okay, could this work? Essentially, you're asking, could this work? Do we get each other? Would we be friends in real life? Or is this person in it because they want a personal trainer, which is a completely different model. And I don't believe, I still to this day, whenever I speak to people, friends that are in the personal training game, who are literally at a gym waiting to show somebody a certain exercise and then count the reps 1 to 10 or 1 to 12, whatever. I don't understand that, because once you know how to do each of the exercises, which takes an hour, once you know how to do that after the initial consultation, after the initial session, then it's a case of kind of, you just go online, you Google the progressions, you Google, you understand simple things like the muscle is going to grow stronger faster than the tendons and ligaments, and therefore you should gradually kind of increase weight. You know that if you have certain types of pain, you should back off, etc. But you know that the weight should be added gradually, and you should get to a point, and then you need to kind of like carve out. Initially, you kind of add in the habit. So I think what people use personal trainers for in a gym a lot of the time is accountability. and being able to say that my PT is waiting for me at the gym, and that makes them accountable. That gives them a responsibility to actually be there because he or she is going to be there waiting for them. That's a different mentality for me, and I'm not there to motivate people or I can definitely kind of motivate people, but it's not for me. If you're an online coach, you kind of prescribe the sessions, figure out what is hard for somebody, figure out what is too hard, figure out what was too easy. Most of the time, you're actually kind of pulling people back and saying that you're doing, as I talk a lot on this channel about, you're doing your recovery runs and easy runs too quick, which means you're putting too much effort into those, which means you're not really hitting your interval sessions in your long run with the full effort that you should, because you're fatigued from the too quick recovery and easy runs. So that's the art of it. It's learning about the athlete and learning kind of whether you can work together, whether you understand each other. But obviously I've coached people that start to complain and they start, oh well, I'm not improving at the rate that I wanted to. And then you look under the bonnet and you see what kind of has been happening in the training, and they've not been doing the training. So it's like, well, what do you want me to do? If I was your science teacher and you're preparing for an exam and you've not actually done the homework, probably not going to pass the exam. Or you might fluke the exam, but you're not going to pass a series of exams, which essentially is what running training is. So you've got to, if you're looking for a coach, the first point of contact, I'd say to get somebody in person, so to get somebody local to you right now, and get somebody at your local club. If you go to the local club, you're not just going to have one coach, you probably have a couple of coaches, 2, 3 coaches, and then you're going to have people around you that maybe have the same goal as you, or maybe have the same target races, and you can kind of like have that community feel. You're all in it together and you can learn from each other's mistakes. If there's 5 of you going for the same goal and you're all kind of new to putting a system in place in terms of interval training, long run, and gradually increasing your volume, etc., you can learn from each other's mistakes, which is what smart people do. So I definitely say stay local. If you get to a point where you're going to do something quite extreme, like ultra running or certain trail runs, etc., then maybe find somebody who's really talented in that area, who knows how to coach people on different terrains, because that's a different game altogether. You're just going for a simple road race and it's going to be flat, half marathon or flat marathon. The recipe is more or less the same. It changes for each individual athlete, but the blueprint is there or thereabouts each time. So yeah, there's lots of kind of like angles you can go out from this, but find somebody you really connect with. Find somebody who inspires you, who motivates you, but equally you can kind of meet on a human level and they can get the best out of you and you can deliver what they want as well.